Hello and welcome to another painting session with me, John Silver. In this video I'll be showing you how to create a landscape painting starting off with only black and white. Today I'm using ivory black and titanium white. The colours will be added later in the video. Starting off with using only black and white is a very easy method of painting. It enables you to create the composition and contrasts with consummate ease. Mistakes can easily be rectified at this stage. If you make a mistake, you can simply go over the area with the relevant shade until you have the painting as you would want it to be. It is extremely important to remember that you will not be interested in the confusing aspects of colour at this stage. This is called an underpainting, and is basically how the old masters used to paint. It is an extremely quick way to paint, which is how the old masters used to do an underpainting for a painting the size of a wall in just one day. Using this method, you can concentrate on the visual aspects of the painting, such as how high or low you wish the contrasts to be, or if you wish to decide if this is going to be a high or a low-key painting. The composition can also easily be changed as you progress. If there is a tree, for instance, that looks out of place, then it is a simple matter to paint it out and move it to somewhere else on the painting, which you think will look better. In this instance, I'm going to put a standing figure in the painting, which I have loosely knocked in. You will see as I progress that I will change the size and contours of this figure at a later stage. I want this figure to seem to be emerging from a misty, sunlit forest area. I'm going to make the foreground quite dark as I want the light areas to really shine through and have a high contrast. You will also see that I am using only one brush at this stage. This is a typical fan brush, which is generally used for blending. However, in this instance I find that this is an excellent brush for loose landscape work. Not only can you block in large areas of paint, but it can also be used for basic fine lines such as tree trunks and branches, etc. It is also extremely useful for putting in random foliage, such as the leaves of a tree or bushes and even grasses. It is very important to remember to keep twisting the brush as you paint, so that it creates a random effect. If you did not do this, then each brush stroke would look exactly the same as the previous and would not look natural. Remember that nature is random, so you should paint randomly. This is probably the most important lesson to learn in landscape painting, so it is a good idea to practice this technique of randomly turning the brush as you paint. A novice would generally keep the brush in one position and the results do not look natural. So remember this, as it is extremely important for the finished painting to look natural. Unless of course the repetition of patterns and brushstrokes is the effect you are looking to create. Remember that in the end, this is your painting and you can do it how you wish. I'm just showing you how I create a landscape with such a brush. You can also see here that I'm making the dark areas darker to create the contrast that I require. I've also changed the figure once again. If this was in full colour, it would be very much harder to do. You can also see how I use layers of paint at this stage. Each layer is dry before I apply the next layer. That is the beauty of acrylic paints. They dry so very quickly, so that layering is very easy to do and will not pick up the paint underneath. I generally achieve quicker drying times by using a hairdryer between painting layers. Acrylics can also be made to dry slowly, of course, though the general humidity does play a large part in this. Slow drying is basically achieved by not using as much water, but more paint. There are many ways to make acrylics dry slowly, and I will be showing you how to do this in another video. Painting in layers creates interest, as one layer laid over another will produce more perceived detail, even though there is no actual detail in the painting at this stage. I keep doing this, building it up layer by layer, until the desired effect is attained. For the lighter areas, I use light greys and white. You'll find with acrylics that pure white tends to sink in and become slightly more dull as it dries, so it is important to keep going over these layers again and again until the correct level of brightness is achieved. This might all seem technical and confusing, but basically what I'm trying to stress is that this is an extremely easy way to paint, both for a professional and also for a complete beginner. Of course, it is necessary to understand the principles of perspective and proportion in order to create a painting such as this, but it is also a great way for a complete beginner to get good results very quickly, and also to just enjoy the physical process of painting. You can see that I have once again changed the figure, altering the size and contrast to suit the surroundings. I will keep doing these alterations until I am happy with the finished result. I have also decided to add some fence posts into the landscape. This will not only create interest, but I can use the format and perspective of these posts to draw the viewer's eye towards the figure. There are many ways to direct the viewer's attention to a particular spot in a painting, and this example is just one of them. Again, these techniques I will show in another video, as there is not enough time to do that here. Next, I will apply the colour. This is by far the easiest and quickest part of the process. I start by lightly spraying the entire painting with a mist of water. This is not to make it slower drying, but simply to allow the retarder I am applying to be spread evenly over the painting surface. I'm using a mixture of 75% slow drying retarder and 25% flow formula, which I keep pre-mixed in a bottle, which is then available to use and easily applied to the paint on the palette. Flow formula is a water tension breaker, which allows the paint to flow off the brush much more easily. I always add a few drops to my water pot that I use to dip my brushes in when I need to wet my brush. I also add some to my spray mist bottles, and it is a good idea to add a few drops of flow formula to any water that you might use in an acrylic painting. Some of the colours are added using a glazing technique. This is simply a very thin layer of transparent paint. Other colours are applied in a more thicker consistency when I require the actual opaque character of the paint to show. Transparent paint, when applied over a light background, will produce a glow that can only be achieved using this layering technique and will always appear brighter than opaque paint. When painting over dark areas, I will use the transparent paint technique and also opaque paint, which will add more detail. For example, if I want more foliage or leaves in a particular area. I will also add more white in certain areas of the painting, if I don't think it is bright enough, or has been dulled down slightly with the overlying paint area. I will then apply more glazes over these areas unless I wish to leave those areas pure white. I will also scrape, scratch and smear the paint as I go along. These marks can also create more interest and detail in certain areas. Scratching and scraping can be done using anything, including fingernails, though I prefer a silicone tool that is made especially for this purpose and can be bought from most art stores. Though you can use absolutely anything that comes to hand. Experiment and have fun, discovering what items will make the marks you require. I use my fingers quite a lot as they are perfect tools for smearing the paint or for blending. Though remember to use a barrier cream of some sort on your hands before you start painting, as it will make cleaning the paint off your hands very much easier. Again, I am altering the contrast by using dark paint over the existing black or grey. As I applied a yellow over the entire painting at the beginning of the colour glazing process, this tends to mute the contrast a little, so I reaffirm those dark areas with dark colours. In this particular case, I'm using a cool dark blue such as Prussian blue. This cool colour makes the warm colours such as the sunlight background trees really stand out. Rembrandt used this technique consistently, using cool colours against warm. Combined with dramatic lighting and contrasts, this is how he created his wonderful masterpieces. A touch of yellow ochre or cadmium yellow into the Prussian blue will create wonderful greens, and will be cool enough for the foliage in the darker foreground areas. The lighter areas of the painting will be warm and light. I'm also again making those lighter areas brighter by adding white to some of the yellow parts of the painting to create a sense of light direction. The sun is hidden beyond the trees, but this makes it obvious that the direction of the sun is from the top left of the painting. As I painted a layer of retarder over the painting, it is still wet enough for me to blend the white paint easily. If it becomes too dry to blend, I just give it a very light mist of spray. This will re-wet the retarder enough for me to continue blending the paint. I am also re-establishing the figure and also adding a dog by his side. It doesn't have to be a perfectly accurate photorealistic figure or dog. Remember that it is the atmosphere you are trying to capture and not photorealism. If the figure and dog were too realistically painted, then they would stand out like a sore thumb and not harmonise with the painting at all. In this case, it would be better to paint the entire painting using a photorealistic technique. Harmony of the entire painting is very important. If I use a certain colour in a specific area, it is always best to try and add that same colour elsewhere in the painting. Except in certain circumstances. For instance, I could add a paint stroke of bright red paint in only one specific area of interest. This is another method of directing the viewer's eye to that area. The great landscape artist John Constable used this technique to great advantage. Finally, I am adding a few little brush strokes here and there, making sure that the contrast is how I wish it to be by adding lighter or darker paint to where I think it is needed most. By glazing, scumbling and rubbing cooler colours into the dark areas, making sure that the overall painting is harmonious. This point of the painting can be a bit time-consuming if you let it. Knowing when to stop and put the brush down is probably one of the hardest things for a beginner to learn. If you do too much at this stage, it can become more photorealistic and filled with too much detail. Far better to stop now and call it a day. And finally, the painting is finished. Thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to any comments you might have or any questions I may be able to help you with. Don't forget to like, click subscribe and click the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I release any new videos. In the meantime, I hope to see you on the next painting video.